Hey there, welcome to the live Q&A. This is Josh Satin with No Till Growers here, and we will be doing an interview with Farmer Jesse today. And just before we get into that, I just want to say welcome to everybody. Hope you guys are having a lovely weekend, and I'm really happy to be here hosting this, and we'll be doing more of these live Q&As with other guests in the future, and I'll be talking about that more with Jesse. So let me bring Jesse in here. Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Hey, dude, really dig that tune. I think.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know where you got it, but I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, man. We'll try to represent that as much as possible.
Yeah.
So let's talk about these live Q&As. I know this is a very different thing we're doing here, and it's a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing this with some other really cool farmers around the world, and so I'm really excited about that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Jesse?
Yeah, dude. So basically what we've come up with, and Josh is going to be the host here. He's going to be moderating these sort of Q&As with these some of the guests that we've had on the podcast and possibly other farmers about no-till growing, so that if you listen to the podcast and you have a few questions of your own, you'd be able to come to these events and ask them directly to that grower. So that's the idea. That's what we're going for. And it's a way to sort of give you all an opportunity to chat with various growers of all different styles from all over the world. So coming up on, I don't have the dates in front of me, but the Monday after next is going to be 10 Mothers Farm. So look out for that. And then we're also going to have Charles Dowding on the following Saturday.
Wait, you said Charles Dowding?
Yeah. Sorry, Josh. I should have let you know. I didn't want to get you.
Man, I better get ready for that one. That's gonna be a big one.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big one. So yeah, it's gonna be awesome. We're super psyched about these, and the big funder for this right now is the Patreon page, where we have these hats still available. There's not that many left. There's like maybe 30 left of these hats, and the hats are really just a fundraiser. We're just trying to raise money so that we can do more of these kind of things, do more video. Josh has been doing a lot of video for us, and do more the live Q&As, all of these things, so that we can afford to be able to buy the software that this is required and that's required to do these, and et cetera, et cetera. So we really appreciate that. That's at patreon.com/farmerjesse. Even if you just kick in $2, there's like a bunch of bonus videos that we've already put up over there. So you can $2, $5, whatever you can afford. It's $35 donation for the hat. You don't have to stay at that level. That's just kind of we're trying to raise money. But if you do that, then you get all the bonus videos that are over there too. So that's patreon.com/farmerjesse. Check that out.
Cool. Yes, I've been traveling to some farms in the last few weeks and trying to get as much content as possible. And hopefully, some of you guys follow my channel as well, so you see some of the farms I'm been visiting and some of that content. But there's going to be content that's specific for the Patreon page. And I think Jesse put up an example recently of one with 10 mothers. You put that up for everyone to see, right?
Yep.
Even non-Patreon members.
Yep.
Yes. So you guys can sort of see the level of detail and the sort of, different content that's on there. And it'll be just different from what I'm doing on my channel. But usually we'll try to do more focused, more nerdy, more detailed kind of things on there. And for example, I went to see Elliot Seldner, a Fair Share farm, a couple of days ago. So I got some footage for my channel, but also we'll be putting up a No-Till Growers. And I don't know if you've posted all the 10 Mother stuff yet, but I got a couple things for you guys for the Patreon members, so that'll be cool. That farm's incredible. And I also have some more videos coming out of the farm in general that'll be on my channel too. What else we got? Oh, the event coming up, Jesse. I'm going to see you in a couple days.
Yeah, dude. Firth Farm's going to be here at Rough Draft Farmstead on Tuesday. And so that's going to be super cool because Josh is going to film that event and film a bunch of the stuff that goes along with it. We're doing the event. Daniel Mays from Frith Farm is going to do a whole talk in the morning, and then in the afternoon we're going to come over to Rough Draft Farmstead, and we're going to kind of do a tour and talk about some of the cover cropping that we're doing here and some of the experiments. Our farm is somewhat experimental, so we do a lot of different things. And in a production context. So we're going to cover some of that. And Josh is going to shoot some of that footage and the whole conversation with Daniel Mays, this whole talk. And that's going to go up for Patreon members at patreon.com/FarmerJesse. So make sure to check that out. And then we're going to do hopefully more events like that in the future. And a lot of that will be helped out by the Patreon thing, but also just we will put up as much stuff for free as we possibly can. The goal is not to put it behind a paywall. It's just to be able to raise enough money so that we can actually do more of this sort of stuff to aggregate this information, because there's just not a ton of information out there about no-till growing. And that's kind of what got us to start the videos to begin with and the podcast to begin with, is we just started with not a lot of information. There was maybe a few Singing Frogs videos, and Charles Dowding was out there. Richard Perkins was doing some videos, but it was kind of scattered. So our goal is really to sort of centralize that information and give people a good hub at no-tillgrowers.com to go read about it and watch the videos and anything that we can find that includes like various implements, and all sorts of stuff. So we try and get all that information out there as much as we possibly can. And it's been my wife and I, when we started our farm a long time ago, we didn't have any information about how to grow no-till. I mean, there was like Ruth Stout, and just a handful of other people that were doing it. And there was a lot about cover cropping and crimping on like larger scale. And then of course, like conventional no-till, but there wasn't a lot of information about how to do no-till on a market garden scale. So that's really what we're trying to do is have these events like the one with Daniel Mays, so that we can bring those people here and you can really see their stuff or go to their farms. Like we'll be doing an event in February in San Diego with Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food and Stephen Cornett of Nature's Always Right. So that event will be in February, and that's going to be super awesome because we're going to be on one of the plots that Jared is setting up for a neighbor, and we're going to actually get to see those plots kind of in their infancy. So you'll get to see actually like go and look at those plots after he does his talk in the morning, and really dive into his systems, because it's lasagna style on like 2 or 3 acres, which is really incredible. So he's just doing such amazing things. And so look out for that. That's at no-tillgrowers.com. You can find some information about that in the events tab.
Yeah, very cool. And the thing that I'm fascinated by is obviously we'll be at your farm in Kentucky, and we have Daniel. His farm's in Maine, right?
Yeah, his is in Maine.
So he'll be bringing a completely different context to the discussion, and then obviously the event in San Diego will be totally different. So just to let you guys know, for the show today, we're going to talk for a few more minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. So just so you guys know what to expect, we're not going to just sit here and talk to you guys all day. We did promise questions, but one thing I want to say about the live Q&A, which is I'm really excited about, is it's just a way for you guys to connect with farmers around the world. And I know that a lot of farmers that you guys follow or admire or just like their work or what they're doing, this will really allow you guys to interact and ask them questions. And so I think that's just so special. And so this is one of the motivations that Jesse and I had to try to set this up. And we're really excited about it. I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for this. And then the part that Jesse was talking about before with traveling to farms and getting content, it just is really expensive. I mean, Jesse and I donate a lot of time for this, obviously, but there are actual expenses beyond time traveling and things like that, and to get to farms. And a lot of these farmers that we're interested in, getting video from, they're people that aren't very active online. They don't have a YouTube channel. They don't have a big online presence. And so we really feel that it's important to capture that information and share it so we can help as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's well put, Josh, because all of that stuff is extremely important to add to that, because I mean, a lot of these people, I think of people like Brian O'Hara, who has a book coming out in January, by the way. He has almost he doesn't even have an email address. So there are a lot of people that you can't get a lot of that information from, that we try and get on the podcast, that you can't see their systems, you can't see the tools and how they've modified them. So that's kind of a big part of the videos, is to really give you, not only talk about it on the podcast and mention it, but literally show you that bed flip or show you that greenhouse or whatever it is, and really kind of get into the details. And yeah, that's the goal. I mean, those details are what's been lacking for us for so long. So
yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, I'm a very visual person, and one of the reasons I love doing YouTube and creating that content is because I know you guys enjoy it too. I think, it's special that Jesse gets the guests that he gets on, and he does a great job with that and asks just unbelievable questions and gets people stories and gets really technical with things, but it really helps if you can see it. I mean, and just like, you talk about someone's bed flip, but like I was with 10 Mothers not too long ago with Vera and Gordon, and I saw them flip a bed and I filmed it, and it was super cool because everyone does it slightly differently, and there's always a takeaway. There's always like, oh, maybe I could do this, or wow, I didn't even think about that. I didn't realize that worked, or wow, that works really well. I mean, it's just seeing something is totally different for me, especially if it's something that you have to recreate in your own farm. So
yeah, and I agree with that. And I saw those, like when I was watching that 10 Mothers bed flip video, which is going to go up on the Patreon page next week. There's just little nuances to it. You can say what you do in a bed flip, but you can't see them actually rolling out that string to line out the beds, or like just the little things or just the stakes they have at the end of the beds, just those little touches that you wouldn't necessarily bring up if you're describing your bed flip to somebody, unless you really, really, really got into detail. But I think that's great. Like those little visual elements add a lot. So we really appreciate that Josh has come on and been able to help us do that.
I'm excited too. I mean, I know one of the main reasons that you started No Till Growers and the podcast was really to become a better farmer. And I know we talk about that a lot, Jesse. And for me, like just in the few farms I visited in the past month or so, it's just like, it's just crazy how much you learn by seeing other people farm and people that you think are doing an awesome job. And then you go and you see what people are doing, and it just changes the way you think about things immediately. And if I can, share some of that experience with everyone else, like that's priceless. So that's what we're trying to do with the video, at least.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you have anything else to add before we open up to questions, Jesse?
No, dude, I'm seeing some cool questions.
Okay.
Like Jesse, are you getting any rain today? I feel like I saw on Instagram that every farmer's market was getting rain today. It felt like one of those days where I was like, oh, look, everybody's got rain. We didn't go to market today. Tomorrow's our last market day of the year. We're kind of shutting the garden down so I can do the podcast and focus on that for the winter. But yeah, we got rain today. We got rain all day. That was from Just Farming. Yeah, rain all day, dude. It was great in a way. I mean, it wasn't that pounding torrential rain that washes out all my compost. It was nice, gentle stuff. We just planted our garlic, so I was like kind of sweating there for a minute when it started pouring, but it's all good. It looks good out there.
Let's see what other questions we have in here. Would lasagna style keep from drying out in the Arizona desert? Have you heard of lasagna style, like in other, like different contexts, different climates?
So I think that's part of Jared's incentive, right? Like he's down in San Diego. They're fairly dry there. Jared Smith at Jared's Real Food, and he does lasagna style gardening. And he basically is using I think he's using straw in compost, like a manure, in mixing those together. And we talked about this on the podcast last year, so you can go back to his episode, Jared Smith, Jared's Real Food from season 1, and listen to, he describes it in really good detail. But yeah, I think part of the incentive is that it holds the water so well. Now, desert farming is different. I mean, you definitely have to have some form of water. If you're going to grow intensively, you need some sort of external source of water. And now you could, I don't know. Yeah, I think that it would help you retain water. Absolutely. Moisture is key to growing food. Food is made of water. So you really have to have, some good source of water. But yeah, absolutely. Lasagna style is great for that because for many reasons, but also at the same time, like you may want to think about not raising your beds too high in the desert. Like if you are going to do lasagna, you may want to keep it. You don't want that raised bed effect as much, perhaps, because your beds are going to dry out a little quicker if they're raised. In a lot of desert regions, they grow they grow in like ditches as opposed to mounds. So either flat against the ground or a little bit below. If you get torrential rains, that could cause an issue from time to time, but I think you really want to retain that coolness and you want to retain that moisture as much as possible. So yeah, I mean, look at some of what they're doing in regions that are similar to that, like in terms of, some of the no-till agriculture that's going on over in all over Africa, all over the deserts of Africa. There's several different things going on over there. And I don't have a specific name off the top of my head, although in Growing a Revolution, David R. Montgomery's last book, he talked about a gentleman that's out there doing really good work in Africa on no-till growing. And it's not all vegetable production, but they do a lot of grains and stuff out there. But it's worth looking into that and just seeing like what they're doing, emulating those areas that are similar to you.
Hey, Jesse, can you talk about what is lasagna style gardening? I don't know if everybody knows what that is.
Oh, that'd probably be a good idea. So basically, lasagna style gardening is multiple layers of carbon and nitrogen. And it doesn't have to be basically like there's a million ways to do it, but let's just give you a general example. You could do a layer of cardboard, a layer of like semi-composted manure or not very well composted horse manure or something, and then another layer of some sort of straw, and then another layer of some sort of composted manure or whatever. And then you build that up, and then maybe on the top you put in some sort of and you can use finished compost. I'm just kind of throwing out some examples here. And maybe on the top, and I think this is what Jared Smith did, and I also think this is what Stephen Cornett did, who will also be at that event, put in a cover crop, and that cover crop over the winter or over a period of time will help to, sort of bring in the microbial life that you need and sort of break up that kind of break in that lasagna bed. So a lasagna bed is just like a lasagna. It's just, layers of things.
Okay, and so does that also work for weed prevention or for covering up sod or anything like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the first that's general idea is that you want to mix your carbon and nitrogen for aeration, but you also want that good solid mat against the soil or against the sod to keep it from coming back. Yeah.
Cool. All right, that's a lot about lasagna. Now I'm getting hungry. Oh wait, different kind of lasagna. Okay, a lot of people jumping in here, which is awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. And if you guys could click the like button, that would be greatly appreciated, just to give the video a little bit of a boost. We would love that. So the next question I have in here is about iceberg lettuce. Do you ever grow iceberg lettuce, Jesse? I've never grown it.
Yeah, we've never grown iceberg. What's the question?
Have you tried iceberg lettuce? Nobody talks about it. I've never grown it either.
No, I've not. I don't know. I don't see it often come up in catalogs, but maybe I just kind of glaze over it. I think it would be cool to get like a really good, high flavorful iceberg lettuce. I think customers would really respond to that. Like people love it when we bring stuff they recognize, but it's maybe an heirloom or it's just grown organically. They get really excited about that. Anytime we bring romaine lettuce, people freak out because they know what romaine is. So yeah,
I bet you could crush it at market with iceberg lettuce. I bet you could kill it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
And I'm sure if you grew it more locally and the way that we like to grow things, I think it'd be a big taste difference too. I'm sure. Because like all the iceberg lettuce we get has been, harvested and packaged for a while.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think anytime you can do that, we do it. Carrots. That's one reason that carrots sell so well. People love organic carrots,
Yep.
and we sell a lot of them. And anything that is pretty comfortable for them is a great gateway into trying maybe less, more unusual crops or maybe stuff a little bit off the beaten path. And they start to grow a relationship with you, and that's really what those kind of crops are about, is building that relationship with those customers who may not normally seek out, an organic grower or, somebody growing like in the various styles that we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's something to be said for familiarity with crops that you grow, because people want to buy carrots and tomatoes and lettuce and spinach and, all the stuff that most Americans eat, they'll feel comfortable with buying before they adventure off into the more obscure things that you might want to grow or maybe are a little more profitable or whatever. So, yeah, I'm not saying go grow iceberg lettuce, but I don't know, maybe a bed of it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun. It sounds now I kind of want to seek out some seed. I want to try some like good,
Iceberg.
certified organic, like no-till
Yeah.
crazy iceberg lettuce and see if
It's
it's
probably
see
very
if it,
different. I just want to make tacos or something with it. That's
yeah. I know. That sounds fun.
Wait, see, we're
We do
doing
that
this
with
at like
cabbage.
almost dinner time. This is not a good time, Jesse. Now I'm just, talking about food.
Right. Yeah. Sorry about that.
All right, no worries. Thank you guys. There's a lot of really nice comments in here. We really appreciate it. Oh, Jesse, here's a good one for you. Why did you change the name of the YouTube channel?
Yeah, well, a few reasons. One, I kind of it stopped being so much about my farm, and our farm is a base for no-till growing, for like no-till growers. It's kind of been the hub of what we're doing, but we want to expand that a little bit, and we just kind of wanted to, it's a hard question to answer, because basically, like, the whole idea is that we don't want it to be about our farm. We want it, and we don't want it to be about me. We don't want it to be about like Farmer Jesse's channel. We just want it to be about the style of growing. So we kind of just figured it was the right time, and neither my wife nor I had a big affection for the channel as Rough Draft Farmstead, and embracing a little bit of change is good, and just adapting. And if later on we decide to change it back, I'm just gonna do it. It's not like I like a little bit more fluidity with that sort of stuff, and just not being so focused on it staying one way or another. So yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, there was a lot of thought about it. I talked to Josh about it, and I talked to Jackson about it, and I was like, no, I think it's the right move. I think it just makes sense to have a channel for people who are looking for this kind of stuff. And instead of starting a whole other channel, people that were watching my channel anyway were generally interested in no-till growing. So it just seemed like the natural, dare I say, organic thing to do.
Yeah, I know we talked about it quite a bit beforehand, and I think it made more sense because it also allows more collaboration. Like, I can post stuff there, and we can be sharing resources more. And instead of starting another channel where you'd have to build an audience from the beginning, and sort of an extension of what you're doing anyways. To me, it made a lot of sense too.
Yeah, and I like that you put that word collaboration in there, because that's a big part of. That's something I've just been thinking about a lot in everything. We've talked about how I've said it, and I'll say it a million times, that I think that collaborations are the future of farming, and I think they should be the future of content creation too, in a way. Like, it's Josh and I help each other all the time. We're always texting back and forth about video ideas and different things about the podcast or whatever, and that's helped both of us, I think. A lot.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to lean on somebody a little bit. So yeah, opening Rough Draft Farmstead YouTube channel up to that, I think was kind of a nod to my embrace of the collaborative farming thing.
Yeah, and just to go off on that a little bit longer. I just been so excited, Jesse, working with you so far, and putting our heads together about collaborating, but collaborating in a bigger sense, because like we're really after the same goal pretty much. And for you to be doing the podcast, and I can focus on video, we can really just stretch and at that content and make it even deeper, which I think is important. So it's really enriching, and the collaboration thing, not in terms of just content creators, but also the farming part of it. And that's the whole thing, is like I go to visit farms, and Jesse, you talk to a lot of farmers, and the sharing and the information and experience is just awesome. Like we all got to help each other. So I just, man, it's like, right to my heart. I love it. So it's great.
Yeah, dude. Totally with you on that.
All right. Let's see. Have you tried the Bad Cat Tine Rake? I have not tried that.
No, but I'm putting up a video on Monday where JM talks about that rake. And I was up at Ferme Quatre Temps on Hannah and I went up there, let's see, it must have been the beginning of October, and we went and got to see Grelinette, so the farm that now Madeleine runs, that the Market Gardener, that was like where it was originally written. And then we met up with JM again over at Ferme Quatre Temps, and we went, that's his new farm, that's the big operation that he has up there in Quebec, in Hemingford, and it's an amazing operation. But I was like, JM, can we shoot some videos? And he's like, yeah, of course. JM's always like open source dude. So basically he was like, he took me straight to that rake, and that was one of the first things he wanted to show me. Because they were doing maybe, I want to say like 5 or 6 beds of Salanova, and they were covering them because they were about to get a frost. But they wanted to do the weeding first, and they were just going at it with that tine rake weeder. And so there's a video about that coming up, and it's pretty cool. It's super effective. So in comparison to the one that Johnny's sells, the original kind of OG tine rake weeder, it's a different like you can't put the force on that one to do the weeding you need to do that you can on the Two Bad Cats one. The Two Bad Cats one is just like a monster. It's great. Like it looks like, you can put a lot more force on it, which allows you to actually get some of those weeds. Whereas the one that I got the one from Johnny's, that's like the Elliot Coleman. No, not knocking Elliot Coleman. It's just his name's on it. But it's the only thing I use it for is raking baby greens beds after we use the quick cut harvester on them. So we'll quick cut harvest, and then I'll rake them off with that, just to get the dead greens off. But other than that, I don't use it at all for any weeding.
Yeah, I have that super cheap rake too, and I don't really use it anymore. I was using it just for that reason that you were mentioning, but yeah, once in a while, I guess, if there's a lot of loose debris after I go through with the greens harvester. But yeah, I have not used it for cultivation. So yeah, I would love to try that big one. Yeah, it's just, you push down enough where you're trying to hit the soil and you start ripping plants out. That's what I found.
Yeah. Yep.
So okay. Yeah. So look for that video. So someone, Jay Gordon here, is saying he's buying part of a neighbor's field. It's been 5 foot tall weeds. With a huge weed seed bank for years. What would be your first step to prep? I know what I would do, but what would you do, Jesse?
How long? Okay, so you're wanting to get into it in the spring, I'm assuming. Let's just, it's hard to get so let's just say that you're trying to get into it in the spring. The easy answer there is, well, the first thing you need to do is get a soil test, because you need to know really what you're working with. Even in those weeds, you get a soil test and figure out what kind of minerals you need. So I would send it off to Logan Labs. That's who we use. Use somebody that's close to you. Ask your fellow farmers who they use. Get a soil test. See what kind of mineral balancing you need to do. Meanwhile, mow it. Throw a tarp over it. That's the easiest way, because if you don't need a lot of minerals, if you don't need if you don't want to do any sort of tillage, or you don't want to, or if you don't need a lot of mineral amendments, so mow it, tarp it, pull that tarp back in the spring, set up your beds, and go for it. Or you can set up your beds now, tarp it, and then just go ahead and plant in the spring. Either one of those is fine. That's the easiest way to do it. There are a million and one ways to start a garden, though. There are also some interesting variables there. The weed seed, I wouldn't worry as much about. The weeds are going to be in every new plot of ground. There's, any pasture, anything. There's always going to be weed seed there. So anytime you're starting a garden, that's going to be an issue. So one of the things you could also do is mow it, cover it with cardboard or some sort of, carbonaceous material, cover that with compost, and then cover that whole thing with a tarp, or if you feel comfortable, if you have enough compost or manure or whatever you've put over top of it, sow some cover crop into it. The easiest thing, though, is get your beds made, and then put a tarp over top of them so they're just ready to go in the spring. I don't know. What would you say, Josh?
Well, I use chickens, so that's a different animal altogether. I like to use chickens to prep ground for me, and I use a mobile coop with portable electric fencing. I'll camp them out there for as long as it takes. They'll eat everything. They'll put a lot of manure down. And if you're doing that in the fall or the winter, you could tarp it and let that stuff break down a little bit. Or you could, add compost on top and go from there. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I think the biggest thing is to just, create as much of a stale seed bed as you can. Like just kill everything on the top. And if you're not tilling, you're not going to be bringing more weed seeds up to the top to germinate. So that's going to be the biggest challenge. But as Jesse said, if you want to go down the soil test route, you want to get your soil, in the shape that you want to get it in, if it needs minerals or it needs, different structure, that sort of thing. So it depends on your context and what things are going on. But the weeds, I think, is a pretty common approach with those methods.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to use a tarp or anything. I mean, there are so many ways to do it that are never till ways that you're not actually having to use a tiller, that you can basically just do it with a wheelbarrow. But then there are more, like a lot of people, if you're low organic matter and you need a lot of, if you're deficient in a lot of different important nutrients and minerals, it's worth thinking about doing a one-time tillage. And, a lot of people get really dogmatic about that. And I just think, like, do what's going to be right for your farm and your family, and get your farm set up, and then don't till it again. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Get your garden set up. It's just like a one-time negative thing. But if it ultimately gets your soil in your garden where you need it to be going forward, especially if you're dealing with low organic matter clay, like, it wouldn't be a bad idea to work some good compost into it and some good minerals, and then get some beds formed over top of it, and maybe get your weed bank down with the tarp or whatever, and then go from there. Yeah, that's starting a garden. You can do it a million different ways, but I think it's important to not be too stuck on just absolutely not doing it without tillage, because if you're running into hard packed clay, it's going to take a long time to break that up just with plants and working.
Yeah, and I was dogmatic about it when I started. I refused to till, and I really wish I did. I mean, I live in North Carolina, and it's just hard, solid clay. That's what we got here. And so I wish I had put down a lot of compost and tilled that in to start. I think that would have helped so much. And I don't want to do it at this point, but I'm sort of, no matter how much broad forking I do, I just feel like there's compost sitting on top of clay, and it's going to take a long time for that to change. So I think that initial tillage, if you do want to go down that route, I think it can be very beneficial. Anything else to add on that, Jesse?
We could probably talk about starting gardens all day, but
that's true. All right, we can move on.
That could be the only question. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do maybe we'll do a whole thing about how to break ground. That could be a whole nother video.
A lot of nuance there.
Yeah, maybe we do that in the spring. Let's remember that. Okay, or maybe we need to do that now for prepping for next spring. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. We don't need to talk about that now. Okay, how do you care for soil cubes without them falling apart? I'm guessing soil blocks is another term for soil cubes. I know Are you still doing that, Jesse? Are you doing those balls still, or is that just a funny video?
Oh no, dude, I'm into those. So basically, no way, yeah, dude, I love that. Okay, so we use soil blocks. You don't really have to worry about them falling apart if you have a good soil mix, and that's we use Vermont Compost Fort V potting mix. We've made our own. The only time I've had issues with them falling apart is when they're too heavy in your aeration component, so too heavy in sand or too heavy in perlite, and they basically don't hold together very well. But as long as you have a good mixture of peat moss and your compost material, maybe some worm castings and all that stuff, like, follow a good recipe. Honestly, have a professional do it. I've never made soil mix. I've made soil mix for 10 years. I've never made soil mix anywhere near as good as Vermont Compost Fort V potting mix. They're not a sponsor. This is not, they're wonderful. And I've never made a potting mix that good myself on my own. And I've made it a million different ways. I've used the best ingredients, still never the germination, never the consistency. And so it's worth having a professional do it, honestly. But in terms of the soil blocks, it's all about moisture. So the two things that will affect whether or not they fall apart is having enough moisture, and it's usually wetter than you think. It's got to be where you can squeeze it and a few drops of water fall out of the mix, like get it that wet. And then the other thing is not having too much of your aeration component. So not too much sand and not too much perlite or whatever it is that you're using for that. But no, that's always the thing that people ask is how do they not fall apart? But once you get them seated, you can't handle them too heavily. Like you don't want to jar them around. You don't want to just throw them in the back of the truck and drive them somewhere. You really have to just kind of move them wherever they're going to go and leave them there until they germinate. The roots will colonize the block and then the block will hold together. We use the standing blocker now, which we used the hand blockers up until last year. And now I think I was crazy because that was ridiculous. That is an insane amount of work with the hand blockers because I could maybe do a tray in like 90 seconds. I think with the standing blockers, and that's like a tray's like, I forget, 70 or 80 blocks. And those are like 1-inch blocks. But now with the standing blocker, I can do those same size blocks or slightly smaller. No, about the same size. In 90 seconds, I can do like 5 trays or 6 trays. So it's like, it's not even a question whether or not it's worth the money. The standing blockers, they're expensive and they're worth every penny. They will save you that much time in a year, 100%.
You did a video on the standing blocker, didn't you?
I think I threw it in a video somewhere.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Oh, you know what I did on the Studs and Duds 2000 whatever year we're in? I almost said 2010, 2019. I think it's 2010, 19. Yeah, I think I threw it in there because it's just been a game changer for us this year. Crazy good tool.
Cool. Okay. Tom Withy here saying we're launching our market garden next spring. Do you guys have any points we should focus on over the winter while getting the garden ready? I think we hit on some of that stuff. I'm assuming that means bed prep and stuff, but I don't know. I think we talked about that quite a bit.
Well, I mean, maybe there's other things though too that you could focus on getting some season extension in, figuring out what you're going to do for plant propagation, looking at your marketing outlets, like make sure that you're really thinking about your farmers markets now, because as soon as those applications come up, depending on where you're located, those can fill up fast. They may start taking applications now. I don't know. It would be worth reaching out to the market managers right now and just talking about next season. Depending on if you're doing a farmers market, if you're doing a CSA, you may want to just start advertising it now. There's a lot of stuff in terms of marketing that are important to just jump on as soon as you can. I mean, also getting your kind of crop plan down, like figuring out what your crop plan is going to be, and then maybe even checking that with a few farmers, just being like, do you think if we put tomatoes in here that we'd have them by this date? And also just hitting up some of your local, any sort of farm events that are in your area to mingle with the fellow farmers and kind of get some other people that can help you and mentor you a little bit that have been doing it in your area for a little while. Farmers tend to be, and they should be, and I encourage them to be, just free and open with their experience, and that helps everybody. So yeah, those are some things that come to mind for me. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, that's great that you thought about all that other stuff, because I was just thinking about growing. So yeah, anything you can do to prepare for the spring in terms of, picking out what vegetables you want to grow, and marketing. I think we need to talk more in general as farmers about marketing, because it doesn't get talked about enough. And if you're not marketing, you're not really selling, and then you're not making any money. So anything you do for that, working out your stream, like if you're going to be CSA, as Jesse said, or start talking to chefs if you're going to be going down that route. And then other thing is getting infrastructure in place. We're answering a lot of what ifs here, because the question didn't really have like specifics on what needed to be worked on, but start planning out your irrigation system. Do you have a nursery? Do you have all the trays that you need? Do you have the potting mix? Do you have amendments? Like, do you know where to get those things? I know when I started here, like I couldn't find them. It took me a while to figure out where to get those. So there's a lot of work that has to go in even before you put a seed in a tray or in the ground. So lots of stuff to figure out. And do a lot of reading, watch a lot of videos, like learn up, like try to learn and absorb as much as possible before you get started. Because once you get running, man, it speeds up fast on you, and all of a sudden you're into it, and the season's growing, and stuff's happening, and yeah, and then the summer is long. I don't know, at least it is here. I feel like I'm still in the summer here. So yeah, there's a lot of research to do in the off season.
Yeah, I had a mentor, or my main mentor, Eric Smith at Bug Tussle Farm. He said he would always say that it's really hard to work on a moving train. And I think there's like no better analogy for farming. Once it's going and you're selling and people are relying on you for your food, you're talking to restaurants or you have a CSA or whatever, there's not, I mean, it's really hard to go back and do all the things to get set up. So, yeah, I mean, it's good to get your wash pack kind of nailed down a little bit. If you need more capital, find it now. Like, just go ahead and get it so it's in your pocket. So when you get started, you're like, oh, we need this right now, and you can get it. I talk about this all the time, but we still feel the effects of being undercapitalized going into our farm. Like, that's just where we are. We kind of work with some bootstrap systems, and because the money that we earn from farming ends up going in other areas until we are fully So we've never been capitalized enough, and basically we started out with almost no capital. Actually, I would say pretty much no capital. And we still feel that today. So that's like something I always think about, is just having that capital to be able to draw on when you need it, especially in the spring, when you're looking around and you're saying, okay, we need the market fee, we need the tent, we need the, wash pack station, we need, this, we're doing a lot of baby greens, they're working out, we need the quick cut harvester or whatever. Importance.
I agree. The undercapitalization thing is real for most farmers. I mean, even for myself, like, I would love a few more tunnels. Like, hands down, like, you can never have enough tunnels. And then the infrastructure projects, which we mentioned before, like irrigation, if it's not too cold where you are, maybe you can start working on that. Get your wash pack station set up. Do you have a walk-in fridge or some other refrigeration to keep your product? Like, all that stuff, you need to work on that when you're not farming, because once the season gets started, man, you don't have time for that stuff. I never can find extra time to work on projects. So, yeah. All right. I think we talked enough about that one. Yeah, there's tons of stuff to do. And also just, watch our YouTube channels, right? They'll keep you guys busy.
Yeah.
All right. What's a good fertilizer for lettuce?
Lettuce doesn't need very much. It's a low, it's a light feeder, so it doesn't need a whole lot of fertility. I think just a little bit of compost is generally solid. You can throw a little bit of, alfalfa meal or something like that in there, depending on what your mix is. If you're using a lot of compost, we don't use alfalfa meal because it has phosphorus in it. So we don't want to add any extra phosphorus to our soil because our compost is very phosphorus heavy. So we end up just going with a straight nitrogen, like a feather meal or something like that. And maybe we'll put a little bit of that down for lighter feeders, but generally not. We'll put it in for the heavy feeders, and then either just a little bit of compost or nothing for the lettuces, and that they tend to do fine.
Absolutely. If in doubt, add compost, right?
Yeah. If in doubt. Somebody just ordered iceberg lettuce from High Mowing. Nice.
There you go.
I'm going to be on the lookout for that. I love High Mowing. We get a lot of our seeds from High Mowing, Johnny's, Edco. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, those are my go-tos too. And then I've been working with Osborne a little bit too. But yeah, I think people don't talk about Fedco that much. They have great seeds. They ship quick. I always hear about Johnny's and High Mowing, but I've had good luck with Fedco.
Yeah, Fedco's a cooperative. They have awesome seeds. They're inexpensive, like crazy inexpensive. One of the things that we used to do with Fedco, one thing you said, they ship fast. They don't ship as fast as Johnny's. They're usually like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that's our experience. I haven't actually had tested that in a while, so maybe it's changed. It used to be that way, that we always order them and know that it's going to be a couple weeks before we get our order. But with nothing wrong with that. We usually do a bulk order, and we do some little pickup orders throughout the summer.
They ship slower in the wintertime, I believe.
Okay. The thing with them is that you can, and I believe they still do this. So like, you can call a farmer friend and say, hey, do you want to go in on these seeds? And they'll allow you to split up your order, but give you the bulk discount.
Oh,
So
cool.
like you can go in with 4 or 5 farmers and you can go to Fedco and get on their website. And I forget exactly how it works. It's pretty obvious when you're there. But you can get on their website and you can fill out whatever your seed order, and everybody can have a separate seed order. It all goes under one name and goes to one house. So I would do it with local farmers. But then you just split it up and you get that whole bulk discount. So that's, I don't know of another seed company that really does that. That's super cool. I guess you could do that with another, you could go in on an order with somebody else, but that makes it super simple.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, we're not sponsored or we don't get anything for free from these companies. They're just our experience buying these seeds from them as
But if
customers.
you want to sponsor us, go for it. That would be great.
Hey, Johnny's,
Especially, yeah, hey, Johnny's.
if you guys are watching.
Um,
All right.
yeah.
How do your local climates influence what you grow and the profitability of your farms? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, your climate plays a big role. But I don't necessarily know that profitability is going to be about a lot of different factors. Climate is your specific climate is one of them. I'm trying to think of a specific example. And we have a really long growing season here, so in theory, we could be going well into the winter growing without any trouble. Like we do grow a little bit in the winter, but we mostly stop. Our last market is tomorrow. So we'll probably stop there and we may do like a Thanksgiving market, but for the most part, we don't. Now we could though in our climate because we're not getting really cold temperatures until January, February, obviously the light dives, but if you get your crops in October, they'll be fully mature by December. And then, you'll be able to harvest off those all the way through January, depending on what they are. Cold hardy crops, lettuces, spinaches, that sort of thing. But we have an issue with market in the winter, that we haven't really identified a great market for our produce in the winter so much. Now that's partly on us and partly that since I started the podcast, we've kind of slowed down on even trying because it gets so nuts when you don't have a lot of light in the day to do anything in the winter. But anyway, to stick with the question, profitability wise does depend on your market tremendously to take advantage of our long growing season. So Josh has something similar down in North Carolina. He actually probably has a longer season. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is part of it, is that we can grow for long periods of time. But you look at what people are doing up in Quebec and up in the north, and they're, in terms of profitability and being able to grow for really long seasons, they just use their cold to their advantage. Like I think of Frith Farm, for instance, they use their cold to terminate crops, like to terminate cover crops. It's like a strategy for them. And I think that's super cool. Like there's a lot of, everybody's climate has advantages and disadvantages, but you can use some of those things to your advantage. And in terms of crop selection, there are certain, like, because we're so humid, and I don't know if you go through this too, Josh, but there are a lot of baby grains that just don't do it here because we either have to space them further or we just run into fungal issues no matter what we do because of the humidity is insane. And on our farm, we just don't spray anything. Like you can spray them with different, sort of certified organic fungicides, biocides, and all that stuff, but we just don't do that. We'd prefer not to. We'd rather pick crops that make sense for us. So in that way, it's a little bit harder because we can't grow as many of the baby grains that maybe some of the places up north can, or in drier climates can. So I don't know. What do you have to say to that, Josh?
Yeah, there's a lot in that discussion. I think you've hit on a few. One is, and the other thing about using your climate to your advantage, like I sometimes am jealous of colder climates, like you're mentioning winter killing crops, but I think about pests. Like the pests in North Carolina, they don't die here. They're alive like all winter, so it doesn't get that cold here. I know there's I think JM opens up his tunnel for like a few weeks in the winter and just lets everything die, right? Or does he still do that?
I don't know. Maybe.
I think I've heard him talk about that. But yeah, there's a lot to that. I think the market that you have is going to be the biggest indicator of your profitability. If you can get high value for your crops, you'll figure out what crops work in your system, or you'll be making adjustments and changes to make different crops grow in your context. But to me, the market is the biggest thing. Like, what is your sales outlet, and how are you marketing it? How are you getting this? How are you getting your products to customers, and how much can you get for them? I was just with Elliot Sellner, and he said one of the biggest reasons that he's feels that their farm is really successful is because they're 15 minutes from Winston-Salem. They have a proximity to market that's just so helpful to them. There's a lot of farmers that are more rural, and because land is cheaper, you can have a bigger farm and have a lower mortgage or whatever. But maybe you can't sell your food for as much money, and so there's a lot in the equation. But I think the profitability more has to do with marketing and sales. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. You can grow something no matter where you live. It's just how you're going to be able to sell it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
All right. Brian King's picking up Stephen Cornett tonight. Nice, man. Hopefully I'll see you guys in a couple days. I don't know, where are you? Do you know where Brian is? I don't know Brian.
Brian, are you down in Tennessee? I feel like he's down in Tennessee. Is
Okay.
that where? Yeah, I think down maybe towards Nashville. I could be
Okay.
totally wrong on that. Sorry, Brian.
All right. Youssef is asking, where do you see the channel in 5 years?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I hope to be doing these. I hope that we'll be doing these kind of live Q&As on a regular basis, and that we'd have really good software and equipment so that they look super sharp. Yeah, and lots of tutorials. Like one of the things that Josh and I have been talking about is we've been amassing, these videos for the Patreon page. And then at some point, like once the Patreon page gets to a certain level, and we haven't determined what that level is exactly, but once it gets to a certain level, we're good. Like we've got the money we need to make these videos. At that point, then we would release all of those videos in a flood onto YouTube for free for anybody. It would just have to sustain at that level. We're not trying to get rich on this. We just need to make it worth our time, not even worth our time. We just fit so it's not costing us money to do it. And so that's kind of what we're working towards, is that in the future, I imagine having thousands of videos. In 5 years, there would be thousands of videos of just really precise stuff that's going on in all these different no-till farms. And having Josh shoot a lot of these farms, and having it be something that is easily digestible and is really, really packed full of value. That's kind of what I see coming up in the next few years, is really just packing this channel full of as much value and as much interaction as we possibly can for you all and for ourselves. Like it's like Josh mentioned earlier, we started No-Till Growers because we want to be better farmers. We didn't start, I never have and never do and never will have the intention of using this to get out of farming. Like my goal is to be a better farmer. So I'm using this channel to sort of emphasize that, to make it, to help myself, and in so doing, share it with you. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of been our approach. And I think that it's been successful so far, and we want to keep that going. So that's what the next 5 years in my mind look like. Do you have anything to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, I think I really want to, emphasize again what you were saying about the paywall. And like Jesse and I talk about this a lot, not on camera, obviously, or being recorded, but we don't like it, but we need to be pulling in some money to pay our expenses for this project. That's just the reality. Jesse and I don't live extravagant lives, don't plan to. But if we can pay ourselves to make this content available for you guys, that's the goal. And I think my goal would love to open up all this information to everybody. I've said that on my channel before, that I don't like this sort of situation, and it's been a struggle for me personally to try to put myself in that place. But this is the reality that we need to do to push this information out, because we feel really strongly about this, and we're trying to make it happen. And I mean, Jesse's been at the podcasting thing longer than I've been doing YouTube, and he's put in so many hours, guys. You have no idea how hard Jesse works with this. So, and I'm just getting involved with no-till growers and sort of seeing what that entails. And yeah, it's just So I think what I'd like to see here, and then everything else that I'm involved with, is just more sharing, more information, and helping people grow better food. That's it. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just saw that Brian King is from Louisville.
Oh,
and he grew up in the Burke. He grew up where I am now. So
close to you, man. Right?
I knew that, Brian. I totally knew that. Yeah, I remember we talked about that.
Tennessee, yeah. Louisville,
whatevs. No, Louisville's way better. Louisville's awesome.
Okay.
Terrible college basketball team, but.
Derek Harvey is asking, I have nothing to add about college basketball. Sorry, Jesse. I know that's your thing, but in my area, the farmers markets aren't great. How can I make it better and to make it worth my time to start a market garden? I don't sell at markets, so Jesse, maybe you have something to add to that.
I mean, I would consider not selling at markets. It depends on what your restaurant scene looks like. It depends on what your potential for a CSA looks like. Don't go try and make a market better. I think that is a really hard thing for a farmer to do. You have to find a market manager that wants to do that. Um, a good market manager is one of the most valuable things in the farming world. We have a great market manager, and Josh, this guy named Josh, also Josh, at Lexington Farmers Market. He's incredible. That's key. It's key. So if you don't have a great market and a great market manager, even if you bring the best produce in the world and the best attitude, it doesn't guarantee that the farmer's market's going to thrive. So I would, you know, if you get a group of farmers together and you really push at it, and maybe you bring a CSA there and you really want to make it better, definitely go for it. But it's tough to beat a slow market, man. We've been there, and it's tough. It's tough to go. You feel committed to the customers that are coming, and you think every day that it's going to get a little better, and it just doesn't. You come home with $200 or $300 or less, $60, and it's just a huge waste of your time. And that's so hard when you're trying to start a business. Go for the more sure markets to begin with if you can. Restaurants, CSAs. You know, we've been talking a lot about CSAs recently since the 10 Mothers interview, and it's kind of made me rethink whether or not it's a really good and viable business model. Because I think for a while I was sort of thinking that it wasn't, that it was kind of going away. But I don't know that I necessarily think that way. I think there's competition, more competition than there used to be. I think that I think that a lot of people have tried it and maybe want something a little bit more convenient. So there's a request for more convenience, more customized boxes and that sort of thing. But there's still plenty of room for that. There's still plenty of people who want to be engaged with their farmer in that way. So there's still that potential. I don't know. What do you have to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, it comes down to market again, and I don't mean like farmers market. I mean your market in terms of like where you're selling stuff. Like 10 Mothers, for example, I know we're talking a lot about them because we did a bunch of content with them, and I have some more videos coming with them. But their CSA is incredible. They do such an amazing job because that's what they do, and it's not like, oh, we have a CSA because it makes sense. Like they just double down on it, and they do an awesome job. So I think it depends on what you put into it, what you get out of it, kind of thing, and it depends on your market. Like they were like, hey, we can't get into the farmers markets that we want because they're packed, so we're gonna do CSA. I personally didn't want to do farmers markets, so I was doing delivery to families, and now I'm just doing restaurants, and the restaurant thing's been working great for me lately. So yeah, I think I can't add to the farmers market, but if it's something that's not going to work for you, it may be more effort than it's worth to try to revitalize that market than to get something, as you said, Jesse, more of a sure bet.
Yeah, and never underestimate the amount of time that you're going to spend at a farmer's market. One thing that I think people neglect to do is they think of the farmer's market as just making money, but you're also spending money to be there. You're spending money on the market fee. You're spending money on your labor. I mean, some of these farmer's markets, that's an 8-hour day, 10-hour day, depending on how far away it is, how long the market is. That's a lot of money. So farmer's markets aren't always the most efficient. Now, if you can come away with $2,000 or, $1,000, depending on what your situation is, then yeah, I think it's worth it. But, or if you see the potential for that, if you can work on it for a little while, for a couple of years. But I think that it can be pretty time and labor expensive and intensive. And it's worth thinking about that before diving into, especially to a slow market.
Okay, moving on. Jay Gordon's it says great ideas. I guess we were talking about bed prep and stuff. He's asking, should I use the rotary plow with the BCS? Do you have that, Jesse? Or do you have experience with the rotary plow?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how you use it, right? The rotary plow. Okay, so for people that don't know, the rotary plow is basically like a corkscrew, and it's a plow. Like it spins in one direction and it throws dirt up over a bed. So if you've watched like the Market Gardener videos with JM, Jean Martin, he does. He uses that to throw dirt from his pathways and wood chips and anything that's kind of composted or fallen down in his pathways on top of his beds. And that's what that tool does. But it can also be used to turn over a whole plot. I know that Frith Farm does that. They use it to turn over new plots. They'll start a plot with that. They'll put down all their minerals and their compost, and then they'll turn the whole plot over with the rotary plow. And we've done that for breaking new ground too. Yeah, it's a great tool. We're going to sell ours. Like, we don't use it anymore. We just haven't found enough need for it. it's a great tool. I mean, it's really effective for that. One thing I want to say about JM's system in terms of like his path management, when I was up there at Growinette, we were talking about composting and adding compost to beds. And he's like, this is the thing I've always loved about JM is he's always been ecologically minded, ecologically focused. And he was saying that he puts those radial wood chips in his beds or in his pathways, and then lets them kind of break down and then throws that up on the beds with that rotary plow. And in his description of it, what he's saying is that he's just doing his composting in the pathways and then adding, because you lose a lot of compost and stuff off the beds when you're cultivating all the time. So it's falling into the pathways. Then you have these radial wood chips breaking down. And he's like, all I'm doing, dude, is doing the same thing you're doing, but with less effort, which I think is kind of cool. Like it's a totally different way of looking at it. But yeah, that's how he uses that rotary plow. And it's a super effective implement for sure.
Okay. I have a question here or a comment about using potatoes to break up ground and add fertility. I haven't heard of that. I mean, I've heard of like tillage radish and stuff like that, but you did some potatoes. Did that loosen up the ground for you, Jesse?
Well, okay. So potatoes grow laterally. So let me put my hand here. Sweet potatoes grow down, right? But potatoes grow out like this. And I would think that maybe they could do a little bit of groundwork, but they're not going to do the kind of groundwork that maybe like a tillage radish would do, like daikons or maybe even sweet potatoes. I've always wanted it to be a ridiculous effort, but I've always wanted to use sweet potatoes as a like groundbreaking, like tarp it, put your sweet potatoes in, let those grow for a year, let them rot in the soil over winter. But it's ridiculous because you got to transplant sweet potatoes, but worms love rotten sweet potatoes. So it'd be an amazing soil breaking, like earthworm loving thing. But maybe one of these days when I get old and I can do more random stuff like that. I just saw that Nature's Always Right's in the Chicago airport headed this way. What's up, Steven? Oh, and then Brian King is a fan of the Wildcats. So BBN for life, Brian. That's right.
Okay.
I'm
Someone's asking. Yeah, you are. How about disking or mold board versus tiller and rotary?
I mean, it's just whatever you have. None of those are going to be the rotary plow kind of breaks it up more like a tiller. If you do the moldboard disc, it's going to basically have the same effect, but it just depends on what equipment you have. Like I wouldn't buy a moldboard plow and a disc. I would have some neighbors come over and do that work. Plow, if you want to use it sort of in the JM style, then it's worth the money because it's not that crazy expensive. I think it's an $1,800 implement at last I looked. I kind of guessing there, but I'm pretty sure that's in the range. Could be less than that. But then with the tractor, you're looking at maybe $6,000 or $7,000. And then the beauty of the BCS, and I know that JM has emphasized this and a lot of people have emphasized this, but in order to buy like a decent 45 horsepower, whatever tractor, you're going to spend $9,000 or $10,000. You can pretty much get the entire BCS setup with the flail mower, the rotary plow, the power harrow, all those things, for like $11,000 or $12,000. So you can either just get a tractor with no implements or all the implements and a tractor for basically the same price. So I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you have access to, really. I don't know that there would be a big difference in terms of soil impact. Although driving over it with a big tractor with a mobile plow and then the discs is pretty hard. It's pretty hard on soil, I think. It's just that compaction. But they say that I don't know how many studies have been done about it, but they say plowing, like flipping the soil over, is actually better for the soil overall. So just because it kind of keeps it a little bit more intact. But then if you're gonna have to break it up or manage it some way to be able to get into it in the spring anyway. So I don't know. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that, I guess.
Okay. Have you ever done an honor system sales shed, like on the farm where people can just like drop in and pay for stuff? Have you ever tried that, Jesse?
We've done a little bit of that. It's hard to manage it from our end. because it's like, I think it could be done really well. Like, I think farm stores have a lot of potential. I honestly think that they have a ton of potential. We don't take enough advantage of them. There was a great farmer to farmer episode about that. And there was a guy in Indiana, I can't remember the name of his farm, but he did a farm stand. He was super successful. And I think there's a lot of potential for that kind of thing. We don't really do that much. We do have a couple on-farm pickups for CSA, and then we do have one or two customers who call us and say, what do you have? And then they, put in an order and come get it. That can be hard to manage just because putting a fresh sheet together for anyone, if you're not doing it for several people, it can be kind of tough. But if they want to if you have stuff that is easily accessible and they can just come and get it, I don't know. It's hard to make that efficient and effective. Maybe when you're starting out and you're building relationships, it may be okay to do a little bit extra work on that and try and develop a system for it. But for us, it's been hard just because we don't have enough people wanting to come to the farm to pick up necessarily.
I think it depends on where you are, right? I mean,
oh yeah, your location is going to make a big difference.
yeah, if you're on a busy road, maybe you put up a sign. I don't know. But if you're sort of more remote, like I know where I am, like I'm in a suburban neighborhood, so it wouldn't really work out. I would be able to get a lot of traffic by my house.
Oh, dude, I don't know. That would be great. You may get in trouble for running a business out of your backyard like that, but
no, I think it's fine if you're selling like raw vegetables. I was looking into it, but I'm not giving anyone advice here about the law in your area. But yeah, I don't want to. Actually, my street's very quiet. I live on a dead end street, so I don't get a lot of traffic by my house. So someone's asking about root cellars. Have you ever had a root cellar, Jesse?
Not really. Our neighbors built a root cellar. Our mentors, we lived really close to them and we worked with them a lot, and they built a root cellar. It was pretty neat. I mean, they're amazing. Like, it's incredible to walk into a building in the middle of the summer and have it be 55 degrees or basically like a cave. Yeah, I think if you can do it, they're great. They're great for so many different things. Being able to store stuff, with no electricity or just using the coolness of the earth. And it stays that sort of 55, 65 degrees through all temperatures. So it's great. If you can do it, it's good for potatoes and that sort of stuff. But if you're not doing a lot of those sort of storage crops, it may not make sense. Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to have them. It's nice to have it, especially if you need like a storm cellar also. Yeah, absolutely. But you have to put them close to your house. If you put them too far away, you won't use them. That goes with everything. Like, you need to keep the things that you are going to go to the most often close to your house. The further away you put something, even if it's a garden bed, the plots on our farm that are the furthest from the house are always the weediest. And it's the same thing with, you're not going to go to your cellar, even your storm cellar, if it's far away. So yeah, as long as it can be close to your house, absolutely. It's awesome.
A lot of permaculture principle in there, what you're talking about. If you guys don't know about the whole zoning thing with permaculture, keeping things closer to your house, they'll get more traffic. You'll pay attention to them more, that sort of thing. Hey, Jesse, we gotta get a couple more questions, but how many more days we got left on the hat promotion, by the way? Do you want to talk about that? I don't think you mentioned that before.
Yeah, so the hat promotion, this ends on November 1st at midnight. So basically October 31st at midnight, Halloween. So the thing with the hats is that this is a fundraiser. We're just trying to raise money so that Josh and I can do more of these kind of live Q&As. We can do more videos for this. We can do more with the podcast. We can just be able to cover our expenses and that sort of thing. So this is kind of one of the things we came up with to get more people signed up for the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/farmerjesse if you're interested. And you can sign up for $2 a month. There's a bunch of bonus material over there, $5. The hat is at a $35 tier. After you get the hat, you do not have to stay at $35. We just want to get people signed up for the Patreon page. And you get shout outs on the podcast and stuff. So it's kind of a cool thing. And these hats are pretty slick. I don't know if you can see it, but the guy that designed our logo and designed these hats was Grammy nominated for his design. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Okay. So go check that out. Only a few more days left in that, and we've gotten a lot more people involved, which has been exciting. Not just for the donations, but also just having more people saying yes, like I want to be part of this. I want to help you guys. I want to get more information out there. So that's one of the biggest things about it. Is just getting more people involved.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's get back to some questions. There's a question here about robots on farms. Have you? I know, Jesse, we've talked a little bit about this, but that sort of advancement in technology and robotic stuff on farms. Do you see that becoming a thing, or something you want to look into, or how do you think? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it will become a thing. I think that drone technology, for instance, is robotics, right? Like it's a flying machine that you can use to do a bunch of stuff. So maybe you could get, yeah, I mean, there's definitely that stuff's going to come, and it's going to be integrated on a small scale into small market farms. And I'm not necessarily against that. Like that doesn't necessarily bother me. That's just another form of technology that we'd be able to use. I mean, in terms of like a robot doing the job, I don't know that that's anything that I'm worried about. I don't think that customers are necessarily going to be psyched about like robot grown food. The stuff that I'm more concerned with is like, AI and that, and that's the kind of stuff that would be more concerning to me. But in terms of like robots and stuff, it's inevitable. I mean, some of the stuff we're using is kind of robotic anyway. Like when you're automating, I don't know, your irrigation system, there's something robotic about that. When you're automating, if you have a drone that's checking out your fields or whatever, like there's a certain amount of robotics there already. So you can see where it's just going to kind of slide in, and it's going to be pretty exciting stuff too. I mean, I don't know that I'm necessarily ever really going to embrace it. We always like being pretty low tech because I don't like relying on, I don't know, companies to make my stuff. And I'd rather be able to know how to do it with just like a couple hand tools. But that stuff's definitely going to slide in 100%. And some of it'll be great for farmers. And then some of it'll be super low tech. Like, like I always talk about the quick cut greens harvester. It's a drill and a blade and a thing and like a mop that spins around.
And it's a game changer.
And it's a game changer. I mean, there will be slightly more tech driven stuff than that.
Right. There'll be other tools for us to use for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you any tricks for growing sugar snap peas through the summer?
I would go, I mean, depends on where you are and what your summers are like. I think that it's a tough one to grow in the summer. I would put them in a tunnel, honestly, and open it up really high. So something that adds just a little bit of shade. And yeah, I mean, you could do something like shade cloth. Because because your sun intensity is going to be a problem on peas. At a certain point, they won't flower. They won't actually, do what you want them to do. So in terms of temperature, but it just depends on your temperatures, and you could try doing it. You could at least extend your season pretty well by growing them in a tunnel or in a shade cloth covered caterpillar tunnel or something, well past the spring for sure. But depending on where you are, I mean, the middle of summer could be tough for us. I mean, I think our middle of summer is like averaging close to 90 degrees. So that's not something that I could see being very easy to do, but I mean, if you've got an awesome market for it, it's worth at least trying and at least extending that season a little bit if you can.
All right, cool. So there's a SP3NT is doing a dairy farm stand and doing really well, and saying that the biggest issue they're having is community awareness. And I think that's sort of what we were talking about before, is like if you have the community to know that, you have to tell people that you're selling it. Like if they don't know you're selling it, they're not going to be able to buy it. So that's that marketing angle, and, your market, and, making sure that you know how to sell your whatever product you guys are trying to sell. So yeah, just so you guys know, it's about 6:15 right now. So try to get a couple more questions in. I know Jesse's got a lot going on over there. I got to feed my kids. So, what you're going to add to that, Jesse, with the farm stand thing?
Yeah, I mean, community awareness is tough. You have to approach it. you definitely have to get out and meet people and let them know that your product exists and maybe put it in their hands and let them try it. Because I don't know if you're new to that area or what, but that trying to get people excited about your product, it definitely takes them knowing about it. So yeah, marketing can be tough, but another thing that you could look into is like Facebook ads and that sort of stuff. Because Facebook ads, you can really target them to exactly the population that you want. So you can target them to your community and just let them know you exist with a nice video and some nice photographs or whatever it may be, and just be like, hey, we're down the road. Because that one of the big marketing techniques that everybody uses is, well, not everybody, but what a lot of the big advertisers is, they try to make you a part of that community, whatever it is. So it could be like, if you're trying to do something in Austin, Texas, like make your product representative of Austin, Texas. Like you're taking pictures in Austin, Texas things and doing Austin and tagging your videos or whatever with Austin, Texas, whatever it is. And that's just an arbitrary example, but you're trying to become part of that community and let it known. So anybody that's in that community is clicking on those tags and finding you. So it's important to just be out there and be seen and be communicating with your neighbors and getting the word spread. Word of mouth is absolutely the best marketing strategy. If you can get people to talk about it and then ask them to talk about it, say, hey, if you like this product, just shout it out on your Facebook or whatever. That could be huge for you.
Yeah, I think when you're getting started too, giving away some product is not a bad idea, because people will try your stuff and be like, this happened with me. Like I'd give people eggs and they were like, I've never had eggs like this in my life. And they're going to tell all their friends about it. So, some of that can go a long way for sure. All right, we got a question here from Heidi. How do you keep greens from wilting at the market in the summer?
Our strategy is coolers. We keep everything in a cooler. We do like false piles on our tables. So it depends on the green, right? Like if you're talking about wilting, you're talking about open greens, right? So maybe you're bringing loose leaf lettuce, but you're probably bringing in like kales and chard and that sort of thing. Cut it early, get it cold as fast as you can. It always starts at harvest. Cut it early, get it cold, get it in your cooler, and then get it inside of coolers that you take to market with you. Pull out only what you have to make it look abundant, and then swap those out whenever they start to look even slightly wilty. It can be really tough on windy days. If you're in a sunny spot, on really hot days, it can be tough to keep your greens looking nice. And you just have to stay on it. Just work that system. Like keep them, taking them in and out of the coolers, make sure that your coolers have plenty of ice in them. I've seen people put them in water and stuff like that. And the problem with that is that when you put a bunch of kale or a bunch of chard into a bucket of water, it may keep it a little bit better, but it doesn't, it's not 100%. And it's really hard for the customer to get it out of there. If you can pile it in a way that it's going to move fast, you won't even have to worry about the wilting as much. So, those are some tips for me. I think that you could also, in a restaurant situation, they would take like slightly wilty greens and dunk them in ice water, and that'll revitalize them a little bit. So depending on the green. So if you have potentially a bucket of ice water and you can do it in a sanitary way, that could be an option too.
I think, I don't have the market experience, but I think what Jesse was saying in the harvesting and processing is you can do a lot of prevention there by harvesting as early as you can in the day, getting it cold as quickly as possible, get it in the fridge. And also harvesting the day before can help too by really chilling it overnight, just getting it really, really cold before you take it off your farm. I think that can be helpful.
Oh, and Steven just put in, use a spray bottle. Yeah, that totally. Spray bottle at market. Yeah, get some good clean water in there. Always change out your water. It's got to be sanitary. But yeah, good, cold, clean water. Even put some ice in it and spray your greens throughout the day. That's always a great tip. Good job, Steven.
Thanks, Steven. All right, looks like the questions are slowing down. Maybe take one or two more. Jesse, does that sound good with you?
Yeah, let's take one or two more. About
okay.
9 more minutes, 10 more minutes.
This is a perfect one for us, Jesse. I know we've talked about this a lot. Any tips on growing on a slope with permanent raised beds? I know we talk about this all the time.
Don't do it. Run. No.
Let me just say that we don't have the answer. Can we just say that, Jesse, to start with?
Yeah, okay, so there are two different ways of looking at this. The first is that you can build your beds and your pathways in a way that are from the very beginning or going to drain water. That's your best bet. Um, Putting your beds downhill will help the water drain out, but you're going to lose pathway. Like the pathways are going to erode. If you put them on contour, your beds are going to erode. So those are kind of your two problems. So my thinking now is what I wish I'd done is put my beds on contour, kind of like they are now. They're vaguely on contour. Our gardens are like a slalom, so it's hard to put anything perfectly on contour. But they're going against the hill, right? So perpendicular to the hill, and done something in the pathways that allowed for the water to drain out more readily. Because what happens is it sort of puddles up in the pathway and then it pours over the bed and then it just washes that out. So any wood chips that I put in the pathways or any compost on the beds ends up just washing out because of those puddles or because it comes rushing down the hill. So yeah, it's tough, but if you can set your beds up and you can figure out a good drainage system, even if it's just like every couple beds that it drains out, then yeah, I mean that's the best management, I think. JM Fortier would say put them downhill, and he did that at Ferrum Catcher Tom. They have some pretty good slope there, and they just drain downhill. So I'm the one issue is that you're going to lose. Your pathways are going to erode a little bit, and maybe your beds won't. So there's some advantage there, I suppose.
Well, let me talk about my system a little bit. So I think a lot depends on the slope and how steep it is. I think if it's a really gradual slope, I would put the beds downhill. That way, when the water falls off the beds, it'll just slowly go down the pathways and exit. And I think that works really well. When I was at Wild Hope, Sean was talking about a certain percentage grade that he wanted so that the water would just slowly roll out and manage and move around the beds. I have a much more aggressive slope on where my beds are, and so they're basically on contour. They're perpendicular to the hill, as Jesse says for his too. One thing that I've done, and this was after losing my bed several times in heavy rainstorms, and I've talked to Jesse, I've talked to you about this too, is I've dug ditches above my beds at the top, and I have it so that they roll the water. Then when the water comes down off my house and off the ground, it goes into the ditches and it directs around the outside of my beds and also down the middle between my two field blocks. So I actually have ditches that move the water around my beds, and it works really well. Now, if we get the problem is when you get a lot of rain very quickly, it's really hard to manage that situation. And so that can be tricky. And I do get a little bit of washout on those, but not nearly as bad as I used to. So again, like right above my top bed on the hill, I dug a ditch and it just shoots the water around the. I have my hands in the shot here. Sort of around the outside of the beds. And if you see my farm, I have two different sides with field blocks, and then it sort of goes down between my two beds, and the water also runs down through there. And that has helped a lot in terms of washout. Like it has to really rain really really hard, but like when it starts pouring, is a river of water going down those beds or down those ditches. Either around the outside or down the middle. You can just watch the water. Jesse, I think I sent you a video of that a while ago, watching how fast their water was moving. And if you don't give the water a place to go, it will destroy your beds very, very quickly. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think a lot of people don't think about when they're starting farms, and myself included, is the water that comes off of a tunnel is massive. And so that water also can be very destructive too. So I've seen some farms where they will dig ditches like right around the outside of the tunnel to just, when the water comes off the tunnel, you think about how much land that is. All that water is getting dumped in one little spot. And that's going to come quickly when it rains hard, and that's going to push earth as well. So I'm a big fan of like telling the water where to go, because if you don't tell it where to go, it's going to go wherever it wants, and it's not where you want. So that's my thought about it. But I think on my slope here, I've really some days I get really frustrated. I'm like, maybe I should just turn the beds going downhill, but I don't think for me that makes sense because I have a steeper slope.
Yeah, and I'll also say a couple of the ways that we're trying to mitigate it on our farm is that we're actually broad forking a little bit in the pathways to just break them up a little bit and allow for a little bit of penetration. That we're also planting a couple perennial beds in the middle of so we're expanding our gardens in a couple directions, but also planting some perennial beds to help absorb that. And I'm also going to experiment with a little bit of clover in the pathways, even though it's not great for my situation because I know the clover will creep. Because the way our soil is, I know it will creep, but I'm going to experiment with that and see if in a couple spots that it wouldn't help to sort of absorb some of that water a little bit faster and give it a place to run off without running off with my compost.
Yeah, Sean also talked about that in their new field block in the back. I don't know if I got it on video or not, but he was talking about their water management on these big fields. They had I think he called it a living pathway. And Jesse, we had talked about this like a while ago, but I don't know if we talked about this since then. But yeah, like a strip where the water comes down and then moves. They're going to plant a bunch of like grass. I think it was like fescue or something, just to like hold the earth together so that when the water flows across it, it doesn't just pull it apart. So I think as long as you can keep that separate from your beds and not have it creep. The fact is when water moves, it's going to take soil with it. So if you can hold it together somehow, I think that's huge.
Yeah. I think living roots is an ideal option if you can find a good one. JM, we put up a video at at the Patreon page at patreon.com/farmerjesse that has JM's experiments with clover, and they're pretty interesting. He's been doing a lot of really cool experiments with that sort of stuff. So it's not necessarily for path runoff or for keeping your beds in place, but it is interesting.
Stephen Cornett's chiming in a little bit, and yeah, Stephen, if you do move to this area, or you'll see the rain is so different, man. He's saying like put in swales. I mean, the amount of water that comes down, like the swale would have to be so massive for me to hold that much water. I'd have to dig like a swimming pool in my backyard to hold the water. So for me, it's easier for me to divert it. When you get 3 inches of rain in an hour or two, like it's just so much water. I can't hold that water. I need to divert it. But every context is different. Like if your storms are much smaller, maybe you could have a swale that holds the water above your beds. I don't know, Jesse, have you thought about like capturing the water instead of trying to divert it?
Yeah, I mean, in that situation, it would kind of do both. And
like have an overflow area?
I don't think it's necessarily I don't know. I mean, I guess you could use it in certain contexts, but the problem is that it's like if you get 3 or 4 inches, you're getting that 3 or 4 inches everywhere. It's not just the runoff. So it does, like, the swale will help in certain circumstances. It would probably help, but I don't know. Yeah, it'd be something I'd like to see in action. Because what will happen is like the middle of your bed is not necessarily the other pathways that are accumulating and washing out the beds. It's literally like the whole garden is getting 3 inches of rain. So it's a lot. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be worth a try, I think. But it's tough. It's definitely a tough one.
Yeah. And it depends on your soil too. Like Steven's chiming in again about like I have clay, so it's just the water just runs. That's basically what I'm doing. Is it you can call it a swale or a ditch or a trench. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, it holds the water that flows off the back of my house and property, and then once it gets to a certain level, it starts to divert around the beds, and that's been working pretty well for me. I could definitely dig it a little bit bigger, a little bit more accurately, but I don't have any machinery to do it, so it's just by hand.
Oh, Chris Polk was asking in our last no-till conversation on the Satin Hill Farm YouTube channel, which you all should be following. Make sure to subscribe to that. Chris Polk had asked us about tractor cultivation, but he's just elaborating a little bit, saying that he was talking about 2-wheel tractors. I don't have any experience with cultivating with 2-wheel tractors, but I think it's super cool with those Planet Juniors and stuff. I don't have any experience doing it, but I think it's a cool option. It seems a little complicated in terms of like you'd have to have your system down to know when and where you can use it. But I think it's cool. Yeah, I mean, sure.
Okay. Questions are kind of slowing down. Myself is asking opinions or insight into the movie Biggest Little Farm. I know I need to see it. We talked about this the other day, Jesse, but do you have any thoughts about the movie?
So we did a sort of roundtable discussion with the Organic Association of Kentucky, put one on at the Kentucky Theater here in Lexington. And we went and saw that movie. We got to see it a couple times actually. And it's great. It's a great movie. It's very inspiring. I found as a farmer that I wanted all the nerdy details. Like it's definitely made for the consumer. I found it, like, by the end of it, I was like, well, tell me how the investment opportunity worked. Like, what did your investors get? But, you know, it's a great film. It's very inspiring. It's really well done. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth seeing. It's great. It's super great documentary. And some of the footage they got is just, it helps that obviously he was a documentary filmmaker, but yeah, it's totally worth seeing. I want like the nerdy farm version. I want the you know, the whatever DVD, the special edition, so I can just watch the commentary. Yeah, that's what I want.
Okay. Heidi, I apologize. I was going to ask this. This was up earlier, because she was asking, where can we learn about the business and tax side of market gardening? I know that, you know, the business side, most of us nerd out about all the growing stuff, a little bit about marketing, but yeah, any good resources that you can think of to point her towards for like the business and tax side of all this?
Diego Footer is doing awesome work with the business side of things in terms of a lot of the work that he's done on Farm Small, Farm Smart, his podcast, and I mean, he's been doing, yeah, all the stuff that he's done. There's definitely a lot of good, a lot of good focus on the business side of things. Dan Brisebois is doing a whole bunch of work with spreadsheets and that sort of stuff, which he's a great resource. You can check him out on Facebook. I've found his, I forget, I can maybe look it up, but if you just look up Dan Brisebois, he's at Tournesol Farm up in Quebec. He's doing a lot of great work on the business side of things, and also just like the sort of execution of it, especially with the spreadsheets. Like, I don't know anything about spreadsheets. I'm really bad with them. I didn't take that class. So I don't know anything about spreadsheets, but he'd be a great option too. And then Michael Kilpatrick's doing lots of good work with that too. You can find him on Facebook and Thriving Farmer Podcast. He's great. I don't know, any other resources, Josh, that come to mind?
I mean, not really. I think one thing is, like with anything, if you don't have confidence in your skill set with that, like talk to an accountant or that sort of thing, so that you're not like hurting yourself later. But keeping track of your expenses is a huge start for anybody. That's a little piece of advice I can give you guys.
Yeah.
Anyways, it looks like we're sort of wrapping up here. Anything else you want to add, Jesse? I mean, I know we mentioned this before, but we got a couple of really cool live Q&A events coming up. November 4th will be with 10 Mothers Farm. And what's the date for the Charles outing? You said November 9th. Is that right?
Whatever the next Saturday is. I think it's the 9th.
Okay.
9th or the 11th? I think it's the 9th.
Okay. And so,
yeah, Charles Dowding.
Cool. And the other thing we didn't really mention was that we want to try to coordinate this with the podcast as well. So if we can get a guest on within a week or two of the podcast coming out, I think that would be really special. So we're going to see if we can make that happen too. That would be super cool. What else? Anything else you want to add before we close out tonight?
Just thank you all for watching and for your support. If you want to kick in a few bucks and just help Josh and I and Jackson do this sort of no-till growers thing and aggregate more of this information and get more videos and do more of these live Q&As and that sort of thing, go to patreon.com/farmerjesse, patreon.com/farmerjesse. There are like 30 more of these hats. You can snag one at the Rad Hatter tier. And that ends on November 1st. So that's going to go fast. And we appreciate the support and appreciate you all watching. And we'll be doing this again. And like you said, 10 Mothers and Charles Dowding coming up in the next couple of weeks. And also a lot of good material going to go up for the patrons at patreon.com/farmerjesse with the Frith Farm event. We're going to post that entirely for the patrons. So that'll only be exclusive for the patrons for right now. And it's just like, yeah, it's a couple bucks a month and it keeps us doing it. So, yeah, consider signing up and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we really can't wait to share some of the content, and I'm hoping to get as much footage as we can, maybe some, behind the scenes sort of conversation. There's gonna be a lot of cool farmers there. So I'm going to try to capture as much of the event as I can and really try to share that with people. So we'll see how I do with that. But yeah, I'm super excited about all that. And yeah, please consider donating to the Patreon page. It's going to help a lot. So thanks a lot, guys. And Jess, if you want to wish everyone a good evening, that would be awesome.
Yeah, you all have a great night, and we appreciate you watching. Thanks.